In this video, we're going to be looking at the basics of trance production. So we've already looked at drum and bass. What is the difference between drum and bass and trance? Well, first of all, the BPM. So obviously in drum and bass, the BPM is very important because it's 170, 180. In trance, it's a lot less. It's 138. Technically, trance can really be, because trance is such an enormous subgenre. It's probably one of the first subgenres of EDM to really become popular and big. You can find that the BPM can range from anything from really actually as low as 125 to as much as 145, maybe even 150. So the range is enormous. You really do get a very wide range of BPMs in trance. Typically, I would say for modern trance, for modern upbeat driving trance, where you've got like a driving bass line, then I would say between, 138 is the figure that's often touted as being the be-all and end-all for trance BPMs. So I've gone with that for the time being. Now, what do we have in terms of the drum loop as well? Well, just like with a lot of subgenres of EDM, the drum loop remains the same. So you always have the kick drum on the first beat of every bar, like so. Important to note that I have also used some trance-specific samples as well. So with trance, the kick drum tends to be really big and fat and generally a longer transient time. So you tend to find that, if you're actually designing a trance kick, which is something we look at in my trance course, then you'll find that the sort of the latter half of the kick still retains a lot of volume in order to really create a driving feel. Again, you have the clap on the second and fourth, and the hi-hat on every offbeat. So this is a default, but if you want to make things a little bit interesting, you can maybe switch it up a little bit like I've done here, and we get something that sounds like this. So you get the idea. And typically, just like with house and with so many other subgenres, you'll have a cymbal crash every 4 or 8 bars as well, and sweeps as well. Trance does tend to make use of a lot of sound effects, perhaps more so than other subgenres of EDM, speaking very generally. So you'll tend to find that you'll have a lot of laser noises, sweeps, cymbal crashes, and lots of other sort of miscellaneous sounds to really fill the sonic space. So unlike in genres like trap or hip hop, where really you want, the less the better, especially in hip hop and trap, where you really have a drum loop and a bass and that's basically it in some cases, then in trance it's all about trying to fill up the space as much as possible, which is really what gives it its energetic driving feel. So that's the basics of what a trance drum loop looks like. And now let's have a look at what the bass lines sound like as well, which is one of the other key elements of a trance track. So you can see here I've got that drum loop loaded. Let's just have another listen to it again. And now what we're going to do is intersperse that with the trance bass line as well. So I'm just going to quickly drag this in here. I'm just going to rename it to drum loop as well, just so that we get the idea. And what I'm going to do now is create a new pattern called bass, and I'm just going to paste that in. With trance, you'll find that actually you can almost spend days literally just designing the bass line, because very oftentimes actually what you'll find is some of the top producers will actually separate the bass line into their lows, so their subs, which will just be a really sort of simple subby click sound. They'll then have the mid bass, which kind of sounds like this sound, which I'm about to demonstrate for you, and then the sort of upper bass sound as well. So the mid bass sound sounds a bit like this. And basically it's a sine wave bass sound, a mixture of a sine wave and a square wave. So you'll have 2 oscillators generally, and it creates a sort of, again, like quite a driving sound. This is just a quick demo of what the elements of trance sound like. So in the trance course, we'll look at actually designing bass lines in more detail, but this is just to give you an idea. Now, the key thing with most trance bass lines, almost exclusively, they are made up of most of the notes in a bar, and they'll repeat, but crucially they'll miss out the first notes to give room to the kick drum. Now again, you know, there's no hard and fast rule. You don't have to always follow this, but just bear in mind that by and large this is how things are done. So generally you will get something that sounds like this, and if we just play this back all together. And we would probably have that actually an octave lower. Or maybe, in fact, let's just put it somewhere halfway between. So G4. So the crucial thing to remember with this is that you always have this first note empty. And then what a lot of trance producers like to do is they like to intersperse this. So maybe on the first note of every bar, they have the high bass coming in. And maybe sometimes they'll do something like this, where maybe on the second and fourth beat, they only have two notes as well, which kind of gives you this sort of feel. Maybe you do it the other way round instead, so you do something like this. So you can see there's lots of sort of different ways of doing this, but they all resolve around the key idea of leaving that first note empty. So this is what I've always said before about knowing how to break the rules. You need to know what the rules are before you break them. So this is a variation of a typical idea, but you need to know that that's the general idea so that you can then know which notes to delete and how to make it sound different from everyone else. You can't sound different from everyone else if you at first don't know how everyone else is doing it in the first place. So that's something that I'm a very big believer of, and I think is very important. So it gives you an idea of what the trance bass line is as well, and in the next video we're going to look at what a trance lead sounds like.